It has been 41 years since America bailed out of Vietnam and ended their participation in what remains the open wound on many a facet of this nation. The desperate and chaotic pullout from Saigon remains etched in the minds of many veterans and their families. Those who to this day look upon the war as nothing more than a waste of more than 58,000 American lives, the wounding of more than 150,000 Americans, and still seeking to find a trace of almost 1,700 soldiers still missing in action. But it is a legacy of war that those nations who once sought to kill each other often make peace and even become great friends. Japan and Germany, the two most obvious examples. So when President Barack Obama took an action today regarding Vietnam, one that many see as a natural occurrence of time, should there be any real outcry? Or is this merely America doing what it takes to shake hands with an old enemy and make it to our advantage? We begin with this scene setter from John Bachman. John?
Well, Ed, there has not been much outrage except from the Human Rights Watch. President Obama downplaying today the impact that this new arms deal also will have on the U.S. posture towards China. But selling weapons to Vietnam has just as much to do with the government in Beijing as it does with the government in Ho Chi Minh City. A toast from President Obama to the Vietnamese people more than 40 years after the fall of Saigon. There's a new milestone between two governments, once bitter adversaries.
The United States is fully lifting the ban on the sale of military equipment to Vietnam that has been in place for some 50 years.
Today, President Obama swatted away suggestions that the end to the ban on sales of lethal weapons is designed as a direct check against China's growing aggression in the South China Sea. Recently, two Chinese jets flew within 50 feet of U.S. planes flying above the area.
Obviously, this is a concern that something like this would happen.
The expansion of the Chinese military in the South China Sea has also caused anxiety among other Asian nations, including the Philippines and Japan. Some of the new military equipment Vietnam will purchase from the U.S. includes naval hardware, which is sure to send a message to Beijing anyway. For its part, at least publicly, China claims that they hope lifting the arms ban against Vietnam provides stability and peace in the region. But there's been other opposition to this move by the Obama administration. The executive director of Human Rights Watch tweeted, quote, Obama opts to arm Vietnam as anti-China ally rather than care about its ongoing repression. But the Obama administration promises to review every transaction to make sure Vietnam continues to work on its human rights record. Well, Rick Weidman, the executive director for Vietnam Veterans of America, told McClatchy newspapers, quote, having returned several times since the war, I will say the Vietnamese love us, they hate the Russians, but they love America. 85% of the population was born after 1975, so the war to them is like World War I, in the Vietnam War, rather, is to them as World War I is to my generation. Also, John McCain, Ed, was in favor of this deal, saying it's time for these relations to continue to normalize.
It is indeed time, and the president may have done exactly what's needed at this time. John, thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
Now, the field of battle takes us today into the emotion of Vietnam. The realization a current enemy has never really left a certain battle site, and the new battle being waged for a town where American lives were lost in what they thought was an honorable fight that would save a region and a nation. But in the end, it truly did neither. So let's get to work. He is the two-time recipient of the Bronze Star, former leader of U.S. Army Special Ops Advisor at Concerned Veterans for America, Jason Beardsley. Joined by founder and president at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, a veteran news reporter who knows from the ground up what life is like in places such as Iran, Iraq, and Afghanistan, Clifford May. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us. And Jason, let me come to you first. I have a lot of friends with family that spent time and still have legacies in Vietnam, and I've heard from them today. And it's rather split. There are some who still look back and say, I can't forget. It was a terrible thing to come home. The soldiers who were spit on, the way we were treated here. But the others say it is time to move on. And not only that, but it's strategically the right thing to do for America to make peace and maybe even help us against China. What do you think the take is of veterans today looking at something like this?
Excellent setup, Ed. Thanks for having me on. I think that what we want to look at is if it's the right time, the healing process starts with getting the parties to the table. And I think where President Obama may have missed an opportunity is by not embracing the Vietnam veteran community first, even if it was behind closed doors, to say, hey, I want you on board, this is what we're doing and why, and sharing with the American public, particularly those who fought, bled, and lost in that war, why this policy is best for the United States and why now. If we didn't take the time to bring those Vietnam veterans on board to this policy, this is like a second kind of kick in the guts for them when the king or the president does this by executive fiat without really consulting ahead of time. And it's not to say he did not we're just not aware of it.
We are interested to hear your comments at 1-877-Newsmax if indeed you have a hand back in these wars in Vietnam and others that we're going to talk about. So, Clifford, let me come to you on this one here. The points Jason brings up are good, but do we not have to look at this from a strategic standpoint? Because eventually old enemies have to become friends many times down the road, and this will help, as many people say, perhaps, just keep China just a little bit in check.
Yeah, I mostly agree. Here's where I'd quibble. Vietnam is still an unfree country. It's still a communist country. It is not our ally, but it may be a strategic partner in that China represents a real threat to Vietnam. China represents a real threat to its neighbors, and China represents a real long-term threat to the United States as well. China has done such things as to put oil drilling rigs right off the Vietnamese coast. They're now creating islands and they're militarizing them. And it is very likely they're going to challenge freedom of navigation that America has guaranteed for years. China has hegemonic ambitions. It is and means to be the bully of South Asia. And that is not in the U.S. interest. So helping Vietnam by giving them weapons so they can stand up to China, that's in the Vietnamese interest. It's in the U.S. interest. I would put that separate from whether or not we're going to be allies anytime in the future. Relations can improve, but I don't think we're there yet.
Let's talk about a couple of other wars here. Jason, to you first. Valerie Jarrett, senior White House advisor, is still listing ending 2 wars as one of the major accomplishments of the Obama administration. Do you actually, when you hear someone like that talk about this president ending 2 wars, does it fire you up, or do you think she's got a point?
No, you nailed it on the head. It fires us up because we're men that fought those wars. I fought in both Iraq and Northeast Africa, and friends in Afghanistan. We received a Green Beret a couple months ago by way of a coffin, and a Navy SEAL just recently that are engaged in combat. So it's disingenuous to tell our service members that the wars are over while veterans back here are still, one, dealing with the legacies of those wars, and we haven't actually concluded the combat action. Yeah. So that's disrespectful. We've done our job honoring the American Republic. It's time for politicians to stop betraying that.
So let's then look at some of the issues that have happened here today. Clifford, to you first. The president talks about the violent death of Mullah Muhammad Akhtar Mansour by a U.S. airstrike, a milestone for Afghanistan. But is it really? Because let's be very honest here. Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, we keep telling ourselves, and our administration keeps telling us, don't worry, the war's almost over, we can get out. These are cockroaches. You can't simply kill them by taking out one person. They always come back.
Well, yes, you're right. Look, first of all, this is one of the wars that, according to Valerie Jarrett, has already been ended. So what are we doing fighting there? That said, Mullah Mansour is an important figure. It's in any war, if you can kill a general, that's a good thing. That doesn't mean there won't be a colonel who will be promoted and won't be very capable. That's possibly the case. At the same time, there's a lot of fractures, we believe, within the Taliban right now. If this creates a crisis of succession, that's only a good thing. And the Afghan government is looking for a leadership within the Taliban that wants to negotiate some kind of a settlement. Mullah Mansour was not such a person. He wanted the war to continue, in part, I think, because he had all kinds of sort of mafia and criminal ties that were benefiting from this war. He's a very bad character. So it's always a good day when you kill a senior member of the enemy. And this war is by no means over.
That's the point. That's the point, right? This war is far from being over, and it's far from America being out of it by any stretch of the imagination.
Or Iraq either. There was a mistake, I think a very bad mistake in 2011, to withdraw all American troops and not even leave a residual force. Obama was advised against that by many of his senior people like Leon Panetta, people like General Petraeus, people like Hillary Clinton. And now we've got something like 5,000 forces back there. And we have the Islamic State, which has come up in the vacuum that we left behind, the power vacuum, when we left. So no wars have been ended. In fact, those wars have, I would argue, spread. And you now have more jihadist and Islamist groups in more countries in the world than ever before. It's spread throughout the Obama administration.
So let me do this. I got about 45 seconds left, and I want to come to Jason finally. You mentioned Iraq, of course, but we have a crisis here. Iraq, coalition forces pounding ISIS in Fallujah. Jason, I wasn't there, of course, but I can imagine every time a veteran hears the word Fallujah, they go, that's something we should have finished. We didn't get the job done.
Well, listen, absolutely. There's still blood in the sand when these politicians are claiming an end to the war. We've got politicians back here that aren't taking care of our veterans in front of our Veterans Administration. Concerned Veterans for America is fighting to make sure our legacies that we fought for overseas are not ignored and dismissed. We've got men engaged in combat, women engaged in combat. It's time we stood up and backed them. As a political leadership, we're watching a vacuum of leadership, and it's endangering our troops on the battlefield every single day.
And it is time like it was. We began with Vietnam, where we didn't actually get serious fast enough. We didn't finish a job in there. And once again, we are right back to the same thing with a different administration. Clifford May, Jason Beardsley, thanks for your very candid comments. We're going to continue to follow this, of course. Stay with us. We come back next. We talk about presidential debates. Your calls at 1-877-NEWSMAX right here on The Hardline.